So for an even better Chicago, and this is sort of my favorite map because it's our entire region, and that's really how we view what we're doing, which is it's not just about data in Chicago, it's about data in our entire region, and the partnerships that we talk about extend well beyond our borders out to our region and working with our partners here in the region around us. So here's where we're going. So the Smart Data Platform, this is what we use the Bloomberg money for. So we're building this platform. It's an open source platform, so you know, it's going to take us a little while, maybe about 18 months to get started, but if there's an interest and you'd like it, it's yours to have. We're building an open source because we feel like this is something every city is going to need to use their data. This is our attempt at answering the big data problem of not analytics for 1 million rows of data, but analytics for 100 million rows of data and beyond. And it will be a way, it will be a platform that will be a way for cities to answer questions like targeting emergency services during dangerous weather, or reducing pedestrian fatalities by preventing traffic accidents in real time, or more effectively targeting and delivering services. I've already talked about the rodent control example, but imagine doing that across your entire city and not in one neighborhood, or targeting recycling to the neighborhoods where it'll have the greatest impact, or frankly to sort of take a notch up in terms of spending money where it has the most critical impact on your residents. We're looking at a model through this platform that reduces HIV and other STI outbreaks among young Chicagoans by delivering targeted preventative health services. These are all things that we know every city is talking about, but they're all things that I think every city is hampered in really knowing where to apply their limited resources. And this is a model that we're building through partnership with 2 universities, the University of Chicago and Carnegie Mellon. The first year is spent on building the predictive algorithms. The second year is built on the underlying database models for bringing the data in through the disparate systems. And the last year is built on piloting into the operational departments. As I said, open source and available to any city. And our plan is to package this in such a way that a nonprofit would be involved to help other cities with the execution of the model. So it's really our hope that this becomes a give back from Chicago's perspective to help other cities really adopt smart predictive analytics into their operational model. So that's what we're doing with the Bloomberg grant, if you were wondering. We get that question once in a while. Project Falcon. I don't come up with the names, folks. This one, the name just drives me crazy. But this is what we're doing with Open Data 2.0 because we feel like open data needs to go beyond Chicago. Right now, if you go to our data portal, the data sets you'll find out there are all our data because that's what we've had to work with. Project Falcon is about how we build a back end. This is piping, but how we build a back end to pull in open data from other places so we can learn from that as well. We know that other cities, you know, such as St. Louis and others, are looking at or have already started to build their own open data portals, and we want to pull from their data so that we can use that data in our analytics platform and train that data to help us learn from it as well, because other cities are focusing on the same problems we are, and we'll all be faster, smarter if we pull it together. So Project Falcon is about how we build that back end to make our data portal not just about Chicago, but about open data across the world. That one is early. Okay, so data consolidation. This is one of those things that I mentioned was not as exciting as others, but frankly, one of the hardest nuts for us to crack and one of the most important. I keep mentioning disparate data systems. So for a long time, the last 2 years, we have not worried about the fact that our data lives in data centers, databases, little spreadsheets all over the city, in every department, all over the place, occasionally on napkins on the edge of someone's desk. We have found the data where it lives and pulled it from there. We have aging infrastructure, as I'm sure you do as well. We can't continue to ignore the fact that our data is often not as safe and well structured and well protected as it needs to be. So to address that problem, in August we launched a Chicago-wide data consolidation project. We are creating a common data center here in Chicago. We are not moving to a third-party cloud at this point, though we will consider that in the future. We are building this common data center, as I said, here sort of on-premise in Chicago, and migrating all of our sort of disparate data centers to that single location into a common data warehouse that will feed, that smart data platform I talked about a minute ago. It will feed our, or that data warehouse will feed our business intelligence platform for all of our sort of more standard reporting business intelligence applications. And as we migrate all of these sort of older databases, et cetera, that are out there, we are enforcing strong data security guidelines as we move into this new model, so that as data comes into new structure, it is known good. So we are addressing some of our data security issues through this process. So not all that exciting, but critical, a critical foundation to our data analytics program, because we need our data to be healthy and well cared for. And then one last thing, which is a little bit more exciting, and that is how we plan to use social media data in the future. And this one is a hard nut to crack, and we're working with a couple of interesting folks out in our sort of civic developer community to try and figure this out. And this is how we pull social media into our open data. And this requires figuring out a Twitter classification model. So in full sort of disclosure here, I am an economist by training, a sort of technologist by love and interest. I don't know how they're going to do this yet, and nor will I probably understand it in any deep level of detail when they figure it out. But one of the challenges that we are focusing on in the next year is how to do this, because we know that it is going to be of huge value to us to be able to leverage the discussion going on across Twitter and other sources of social media in terms of how we respond to what the public is saying about what's going on in neighborhood X on a Saturday night, and what the police need to know about that, so that they can respond more proactively, for example. And creating a Twitter classification so that we can harness that information is going to be critical in our ability to pull that data into our models. So basically, all of these small and large projects roll up into making us a more open, efficient, and innovative Chicago, and it requires changes and innovation in not only technology, but in our process, in our business models, and the skill sets of our people. So we're making changes across all of those fronts. That was really fast. I wanted to make sure we had some time for some questions, and so hopefully there are some.
Yeah, absolutely great. Thank you very much, Brenna. Reminder to everybody, please, in the chat box on your GoToMeeting interface, go ahead and put in your questions there. Brenna's presentation will be posted on our website, and we'll send out a link immediately after this. And as soon as we can turn around the video will be posted too. But Brenna, that was a great overview of the whole process. I'm curious if, I'll just start off with a couple of questions I jotted down. Talk a little bit about, this is, in any enterprise, moving to this kind of data is difficult, this kind of approach to it. What was hardest, do you think? Was it technically hard? Was it culturally difficult? Or was it really about changing processes?
Well, that's a good question. I think that the technical challenges were not particularly difficult to overcome. I think once we established the the sort of standard that we weren't going to do anything as a one-off, that we were going to do it right and do it once so that it was replicable, and that we weren't going to take any shortcuts, that was the way we were doing things, that was accepted. The cultural change has been a little bit more of a challenge, and we still work through that every day. I think that, at the highest level, and I don't mean just at the highest level, meaning the mayor, though it exists there as well, but at the highest level of sort of people's understanding that government should be transparent and open to the residents that we serve, that's accepted. But when you get down to sort of the process level of what that means in the day-to-day, that we're going to put out on the web people's salaries, which, that's, for a lot of people, that's the most personal of information, that gets a little bit harder, especially, when a lot of times as departments, we haven't had to explain to people, the press or the residents, why we do things. That's been a bit of a change. There's been growing pains around that, but it gets easier, each time we do it. And it also gets easier, frankly, as our workforce changes and ages out a little bit, because frankly, the younger the person we hire is, the more they're used to, frankly, their entire life being out in the world. So, so it's changing with time.
Talk also, you kind of alluded to, opening this up to developers and other people. So has that been that, I can imagine, the developers that I know and the city folks that I know would not have a lot of common ground in how they talked about things. I could see something like this becoming almost confrontational, that one side is trying to do something, the other side feels like it's not enough, fast enough, and it ends up, instead of being something that opens up lines of communication, talk a little bit about how to manage that.
You know what? I think, we get that question a lot, and I think that's what we probably thought would happen too, but that has not actually been our experience, and I think that's been the case for a couple of reasons. And then I'll tell you where we're actually running into exactly that experience now. One, we had a couple of key folks that joined the administration when Mayor Emanuel was elected that come from the sort of startup/developer community that created a bridge with that developer community and really took it upon themselves and as part of their responsibility to this administration and to create that bridge. So one of those was the chief data officer, and one of those was the CTO, who's John Tolva, who really made it there. And then there were a couple of others, actually. Our chief IT policy person, I just really butchered her title, but she's been an influential member of our OpenGov community. And then there's a couple of others, but there's maybe 10 or 15 people, both in government and outside in the developer community, that were critically active in, you must have meetups down in St. Louis, I would imagine.
Yeah.
That were incredibly active, especially in meetups, talking about what we were doing here in city government, engaging with the developers who really got us to common ground. That actually made that difference. And it probably took about a year before we got those first sort of APIs out there. We also made sure that the initial APIs were ready to go. And I think that was critical. And we actually have our next one coming up. We have a hackathon coming up on May 11th around community policing. That we actually have a couple of developers out in the community that we sort of know and trust and hold close to the fold, that we test things with ahead of time, who we trust to tell us when something doesn't work well, but we also know won't sort of flip out when something doesn't work really well and say, oh God, this is working with old stodgy government, it's never going to work, right? They don't throw up their hands and give up on us. So it's important to find those couple of champions on the outside too. So cultivate those partnerships out in the civic development community before you go big and wide. That is hugely important. The other thing we did was, when I talked about how we were sort of remaking our department, is we hired a couple of them. So not only does the chief data officer and the chief technology officer come from a slightly unusual background, We also hired the lead developer. He was the lead architect for data engineering from Groupon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was a big score for us. We were pretty excited. And he speaks their language.
Right.
And he was ready to make a switch in his own career where he wanted to give back. And that's our pitch, because it's not easy for us to hire from the private sector.
Right.
Right? Our salaries are not like theirs. I can't let them work from home in their slippers all day long. I wish I could. I think they'd get more done, but that's not our culture.
Right.
But we also have a really good pitch of, we're doing really, really exciting stuff here, and we're solving real world problems for, your neighbors down the street in Chicago where you live. So if you want to make $1 million figuring out how to sell coupons faster, which is what Groupon does, I respect that. I'm not, go and do that. But if you want to come and work for, Mayor Rahm Emanuel, which is pretty darn exciting, and figure out how to keep high school students in Chicago healthier, which is what we're working on, come work for me for 2 years. You don't have to stay forever. You don't have to stay forever, right? Nobody does it anymore. But we've had some luck with that, and we've got some people from that community that work on the inside now.
Cool. Hey,
the pitch is like the Peace Corps.
Right. So Brett brings up a great question. He says, as you work at this, does this get you any private sector pushback? In other words, are there people out there that are like, hey, we would rather, why are you letting people open source this or doing this internally? This should be something that we could do. And, kind of, are you creating competition with the private sector of people delivering